Hey legends, welcome along to Sceammeupbotty. I am your host, Rodney Stewart, and just before we get going here, I need to apologise for the audio in the last episode. I had switched about the office here for a new setup for the YouTube channels, and I'm using the Rodecaster Pro to record the audio on these podcasts, and I thought it'd be a great idea to get everything put in the one spot and get this connected up to the laptop for better audio for the videos as well. So switched everything about, and in my haste to get everything done and set up and ready to go, I'd never even entered my head to test the audio of the Rodecaster whenever I recorded the last episode. It's so good where it's at right now. I've actually shifted it back to where it was originally, and the audio is great here, to the point where I don't even need to have the headphones on my head to make sure that the audio was as crisp as possible. It's just a good place for it. It turns out the mic and everything where it was sitting at in the last episode was just close to so much electrical equipment that there was just feedback coming into the microphone, which I've managed to get rid of by shifting it back to where it originally was, which is literally 3.5-4 feet from where I was recording the last episode at. So it's crazy just how easily that you can throw on some feedback. I'll never quite fully understand the ins and outs of audio, but it is what it is. But we're back to hopefully the tasty audio that we're used to on these podcasts. So once again, apologies for that. This episode of the original series is called The Conscience of the King. I'm going to have a little chat about it here, and it's one of these episodes that, you know, I've said it before on most of the podcasts that I do and the YouTube channels, that you really should not jump to conclusions whenever you're watching something, and don't be writing something off straight away. And this is a perfect example of that. This episode, at the beginning, I thought to myself, right, this is going to be one of these really boring episodes, I'll maybe just not watch it, I'll skip to the next one. But there is something within everything that's going to really jump out and make you enjoy it, and it's definitely something that happens in this episode. It's so good. So definitely, writing off and off, give it a fair chance, watch the whole thing. If you don't like it, you don't like it. If you do like it, awesome. But in this episode, we get some of Kirk's personal history, and something that happened to him years ago comes back to haunt him in this episode. At the beginning of the episode, the Enterprise, it's diverted 3 light years off its scheduled course to Planet Q, and it's lured there by the word of a new synthetic food which promises to ease chronic shortages on another planet. But Dr. Thomas Layton actually wants to show his childhood friend Kirk. It's a travelling Shakespeare actor, Anton Caridian. Layton believes Caridian to actually be TOS, the executioner. TOS is notorious because he seized control of a doomed Earth colony, Tarsus 4, and ordered the execution of half of its population of 8,000. And it was like, just think of the Avengers Endgame. Thanos, his whole thing was to kill half the galaxy so that the other half could thrive, and this is essentially what this guy did on this colony. They were starving, there wasn't enough rations to keep everyone fed, so he decided to order the execution of half the people so that the other half had a fair chance of survival. And at the end of it, only 9 people survived, including a young Kirk and Layton. And yes, they're the ones that saw the face of the governor. Though convinced TOS is long dead, Kirk does enough research to get his curiosity about Layton's claim and he returns to the planet in the hopes of meeting Caridian in person. At a cocktail party held at the home of Leighton, Kirk meets Caridian's daughter, Lenore, and the two head it off, and they leave the party to stroll the planet Q's desert and come upon the body of their host, Thomas Leighton. He's been murdered. Leighton's death makes Kirk take his dead friend's suspicions more seriously. After promising Leighton's distraught wife, Martha, that he will find out why her husband was killed, Kirk calls in a favour. He asks John Daly, commanding officer of the Astral Queen, to leave Planet Q orbit ahead of schedule and without notice. This is the ship that was due to take the acting trip to their next destination. Of course, this strands him now with no choice but to ask for passage aboard the Enterprise. Researching everything that's going on, Kirk reviews a list of the 9 eyewitnesses and discovering that Kevin Riley, a member of the Enterprise crew, is actually one of them. Riley recently was promoted from engineering to communication, so he's up on the bridge. Kirk orders Spock to send Riley back down to engineering with the intention of protecting him. Stick him down there out of the way, trying to keep him from getting in harm's way. If somebody is taking out the witnesses, Kirk wants to keep this guy safe. Spock asks why, pointing out that such an action may be regarded by Riley as demotion, but Kirk refuses to explain. This is something that's really difficult for him. This is his own personal history right here, and he's keeping his cards close to his chest. So, plus he has fairly strong romantic notions on Lenore as well, so he's caught between a rock and a hard place in a way as well. Spock becomes concerned about the captain's behaviour and confides in Dr. McCoy. Kirk proceeds to get more involved with Lenore. Spock, not Spurk. That's like a cross between Captain Kirk and Spock. Spurk. My head goes to the weirdest places. I need help. Spock does his own research and he learns enough to raise his own suspicions, including the disturbing fact that of the 9 eyewitnesses who could positively identify Kudos, 7 of them are now dead, and whenever one died, the Caridian players were somewhere nearby. Only Kirk and Lieutenant Riley remain alive. So, Riley, down in engineering, he's bored. A tray of food is at his side. He broods alone in engineering. He calls up the rec room pleading for company, and Uhura starts singing across the intercom. Awesome voice, by the way. Awesome voice. Riley is distracted by her performance. Someone sneaks into the room and emerges from the shadows to squirt something into the glass of milk that's on his food tray. He takes a drink of it, takes a big gulp of it. Uhura finishes her song. Riley begins choking. Fortunately, Uhura's party and the rec room realises the situation and sends help in time to save him. As he's lying in critical condition in the bio bed in the medical bay, Spock realises that if he dies, Kirk will be the next target. McCoy's lab report on Riley's condition, he finds that the lieutenant had an amount of tetralubrizol in his system, which is a milky lubricant used aboard the Enterprise. Spock is now certain that Riley was poisoned, and with her McCoy confront Kirk in his quarters. Spock is now certain Caridian and Kudos are the same man, but Kirk remains a little bit unsure and has to make certain of it. McCoy asks Kirk what he will do if Kudos and Corellian are one and the same, inquiring if he will carry his head through the ship's corridors in triumph. This guy was a mass murderer. Everybody in Starfleet would love to see him get his comeuppance, and it's a dark, dark place where McCoy sort of goes at this point, noting that will not bring back any of the dead colonists. So he goes to a dark place, but McCoy's one of these guys that he'll try and talk Kirk or Spock or whoever into doing the right thing, but he'll go to a dark, dark place to really push his point home. What are you going to do? You're going to behead the man and carry his head through the ship, taking on the cheers and whatnot. Where are we at? Kirk agrees, but notes that they may not rest easier later. A similar discussion Kirk and Spock have is interrupted by the hum of an overloading phaser. Somewhere in Kirk's quarters is a potential explosive that can take out an entire deck. While Spock orders the ship's personnel to clear the area, Kirk finds the overloading phaser in his quarters and disposes of it in seconds before it explodes. Kirk is finally driven to confront Corellian, asking him point blank whether he is Kudos. Corellian gives him elusive answers, and after 20 years of playing parts that, of all things, he is tired, he does perform a short speech, and the processes of a voice comparison with a piece of voice film from the Enterprise's database. This was the speech made by Kudos, condemning thousands of innocent people to death. And, Kirk gets him to read this thing so that the computer can run a comparison in the two voices to see if this is actually, after everything has happened, Kirk still wants to get that hard evidence, because if this is Kudos, he doesn't want there to be any loopholes that he can get out of it, essentially at the end of it. Kirk mentions how Corellian barely looked at the text, hinting that it was already familiar to the actor, but Corellian simply states that he learns his parts quickly. Meanwhile, in the sickbay, the recovering Lieutenant Riley overhears McCoy's log entry, learning that Corellian is suspected of being Kudos, the man who murdered Riley's whole family. The voice print that was done was close, very close, but Kirk argues that a man's life is at stake. Very close isn't good enough. The Corellian players begin a presentation of Hamlet to entertain the Enterprise crew for taking them to their next destination. Riley, having discovered that this Corellian guy could possibly be the guy who killed his parents and brothers and God knows whoever else, has stolen a phaser, sneaks backstage. Kirk sees him in there and manages to talk him out of killing Corellian, who overhears their conversation. Riley, with great reluctance, heads back to sickbay. Kirk is still backstage when Corellian and his daughter Lenore discuss what Kirk overheard during the act break. Trying to shield her from his past, Corellian attempts to pass off his distress as hearing the voice of a part that he played long ago. But he's horrified when Lenore lovingly reveals that she knows all about his past deeds and has already killed 7 of the 9 that could identify him. Lenore goes on to tell him innocently that she will dispose of the remaining 2 after the performance. This guy, Corellian, he's devastated hearing that his daughter's saying this about what she's done. He's like, there's still more blood on his hands, but she proclaims that they had to be silenced, and says, all of a smile on her face essentially, that she buried these ghosts for him and that she saved them. Corellian is absolutely heartbroken, devastated that all of his attempts to prevent his past crimes from tainting his daughter has failed and left him with nothing but a long legacy of murder. Kirk appears from his hiding place to confront him, and Lenore just looks at him, the sheer friggin' disdain for interrupting her father's performance. Kirk says she has killed 7 innocent people, and she declares to Kirk that these people aren't innocent. They were dangerous, and that she would have killed the world to protect her father. Kirk, and the place where he's at now, there's, everything's out in the open. This is definitely Kudos, the executioner. So he calls security to take them into custody. Lenore snatches security officer Harrison's weapon and runs onto the stage. Her eyes show she's gone insane. She's lost it. She's just it's reminiscent of these performers do Shakespeare and all these sorts of things, and where she's at now, it's like Lady Macbeth or Ophelia. Kudos, Curdian, Kudos, Macbeth, Ophelia. There's like a mirror image of a lot of Shakespeare, and here at the end of it, desperate there should be no more blood in his hands. Kudos, or Curdian, he actually, she's got the phaser on Kirk. She's going to fire to take him out, and Kudos, Curdian, Kudos, name it. He jumps in front of Kirk as she fires. The shot's fatal. He dies. So 20 years after earning the name, he's now dead. So the death of him at the hands of his dad, she's done everything that she's done, killed people to protect his name, bury his past, kill these ghosts essentially that are driving him mad. She's actually gone mad in the process, and the fact now that her father's dead at her own hands drives her over the edge completely. And by the time Kirk leads her away, her tears have changed to laughter. She's gone absolutely insane at the end of the episode. Later on, after the performers have been dropped off at their next destination, McCoy promises that Lenore will get the best of care, and that the last report of her is that she believes her father is still alive, performing for cheering audiences. He also suggests that Kirk did care for Lenore, which Kirk just doesn't respond to, but instead gives the order for the Enterprise to break orbit and go to warp. But he does give McCoy one of those looks that's, it's just kind of like it's all the answer that the Doctor needs, and we close out the episode there. Now, I was just reading over those notes there as I was going through them, talking them out under this podcast, and there's a couple of things there that I think I got a little bit wrong, where I was just like, the way she was at the end of it was reminiscent of Lady Macbeth or Ophelia. I think I said that, the Kudos thing and Curdian thing was like a mirror image of that as well, but not really. A little bit off on that, but no, definitely Lenore at the end of the episode was definitely like Lady Macbeth or Ophelia. That's what I really meant to say. So this episode was absolutely fan-bloody-tastic. Whenever you get up to that end there, where you discover that the person that's been killing off these survivors is actually the daughter of this guy to try and protect him, and going into that area right now of mental health and insanity and whatnot. It's one of those places right now these days that is a very, very sketchy place to go into for a movie or a TV show. And I know this from personal experience. The last little independent short film that I created was a suicide awareness piece, and the backlash I got from people that I actually know of that film because it dealt with suicide awareness. It was just simply the fact that it was dealing with that there, like, got a lot of people and in such angry moods with me. It was just, it's unreal. You'll never know how cold and how much hate people will give you until you're dealing with a situation like that there. It's just it's absolute madness. It's crazy. And, it doesn't matter what your intentions are behind the whole thing, someone will just take it for, they'll just really rip you to shreds for it. And yes, this is where Star Trek went quite a bit back in the day, and I think the whole PC crew would have a bit of a problem with this episode these days, but it does tell a very, very interesting story, and it's one of these episodes I was really glad that I actually did take the time to check it out and watch the whole thing, because that end performance is amazing. It's has to be seen to be believed. I really did enjoy it. Fantastic episode. So that's going to do it, guys. Thank you so much. If you're still hanging about at this point of the podcast, you're definitely interested in going with me on this journey of classic science fiction, classic Star Trek, all that good stuff. It is fantastic. I absolutely love doing it, and I hope you will stick with me for the long run. I intend to be here for a while doing this sort of stuff. So that's going to do it, guys. I hope you're well, whatever you're doing. Please rate and review the show, share it along to anybody you think would be interested in checking it out, and I will talk to you on the next episode. Stay safe. This has been a production of Coins Age Media. Thank you so much for listening.